Hello, I'm Clare Watson from Nutrition and Nurture. I'm an international board certified lactation consultant, and today I am very excited to welcome Grace. Hi. And also Mika, who is down on the floor doing lovely things. So
yes, he might make a guest appearance in a few minutes. So my name's Grace and I work for Mini First Aid, and we've just come together today to bring you a little bit of information, have a chat, hopefully give you some useful tips. I run first aid classes for parents and for children as well, and we cover all the kind of key things of first aid that you might be thinking about at the moment as well.
Yeah, so we'll talk a little bit more about that later on as well, so you know what there is. But what we're going to talk today is about introducing solids to your baby, and the safety of that. So there's a whole class worth of stuff about introducing solids, but today we're really going to focus on the safety, what you need to know, what is important to find out about, and where you can get further information from to make that go as smoothly and safely as possible.
Yeah, and we're going to cover a little bit about gagging and about choking and things just to bear in mind from that point of view as well.
Very excited. It's so nice to have somebody to talk to in one of these sessions. It's excellent. All right, so the first thing when you're thinking about introducing solids is when to do it. So the current NHS guidelines are not to introduce solids before 6 months. And there's a few different reasons for that, quite often mainly to do with kind of the microbiome and the readiness of the gut to be able to process the food and that sort of thing, and avoiding allergies. But we're looking at not every ready at exactly 6 months. Is not kind of a magic switch during the day before they're not ready and the day after they are. But what we know is that all of these signs come together with the maturation of the intestinal system, and they all happen around at the same time. So some of the other things that we're looking for are the ability to sit up themselves, so with minimal support, so support their own body weight and stay up. Obviously that's quite important from a safety point of view as well, isn't it?
Yeah, good.
Yeah, so we're looking so that the esophagus is nice and open, they're not going to be kind of crouched over, makes it much less likely that anything's going to get stuck there. So we're looking at the ability to sit up. The next one is the ability for them to get the food from the plate to their mouths themselves. We were talking about this earlier, and it's a great thing because it shows that they're ready to start having solids, but it's also a huge hazard.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to show you some of the things that, along with food, that little ones will try and put in their mouths, and what we need to do just to be a little bit mindful of that as well.
Yeah. So there's getting things to their mouths, and then once they get the things to mouths, a lot of people don't realize that children have this gag thrust reflex, which is there to protect them when they're little from things being there. So with a younger baby, if they put something in their mouth, their tongue will automatically push it back out again. One of the key signs of readiness for introducing solids is when that stops happening. So when they get something to their mouth and it goes in, it stays in, and they can then transport it to the back of the mouth and then into the swallowing.
Yeah.
So that's really, they're the signs that we're looking for. It's not just this magic 6 month mark, but it tends to be all around then anyway.
Lovely. So what we wanted to do next is just have a little chat about gagging a little bit more. So really important that we have a little think about what gagging is. So we've mentioned a little bit there about that gag reflex. It's a protective mechanism that your body is designed. As grown-ups we have it as well, and as little ones the gag reflex is very prevalent at first, and anything that goes into the mouth, as we've mentioned, can get pushed out by that thrusting of the tongue. So when we see signs of gagging, so when your little one is starting to learn to eat, there will be quite a bit of gagging.
So it's a normal thing.
Yeah, it's absolutely a normal reflex, and it's a protective mechanism. So it's quite normal, so don't be frightened of gagging. But bear in mind things like you need to be with your little one when you're starting to help them to eat. Sit opposite them so that you know that they're comfortable and you know what they're actually trying to eat and how they're doing. Your little one can really communicate with you even from 6 months. So a lot of that interaction when they're starting to eat, they will be communicating with you whilst they're doing that.
Yeah, we forget about the social side of the eating.
Yeah, definitely.
And that bonding and attachment, the increasing of the attachment through food and the eye contact, all of that is still, you know, we talk about it when they're little, but it's so important all the way through.
And so eating meals together as a family, or even just with your little one, that's really, really helpful, because that's all part of the learning process for them as well.
They can mimic and copy what you're doing.
Yeah. So other things that we look for when they're gagging that can be quite normal is that they're quite often very red in the face, and it's quite noisy as well. So you know the sound yourself when somebody's gagging. It's quite loud, their mouth's wide open, and they've got this kind of thrusting forward of the tongue. But as they get older and as they practice more, that gag reflex lessens, because they're learning to control their tongue and learning to control that food moving to the back of their mouth to be swallowed and what have you. So we've got a little mantra that we normally say. So loud and red, let them go ahead. So if they are doing lots of that gagging, that's fine, it's them working it out. But what we're obviously concerned about, and what you're probably concerned about, is the choking side of things. So when it changes from the gagging to the choking, and we'll come on to that in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, so is the noise quite a key indicator?
Yeah, so the loudness, the noisiness, the fact that they're quite red in the face, that's you know, real key to that being normal gagging.
And it can be really intimidating, I think, the first time that you hear it. If you don't know that that's normal and protective, it can really terrify you.
Yeah, absolutely. And most parents will be petrified of that and sort of sit on tenterhooks, you know, wanting to see what happens. And it's important that you're close by and watching and being really careful, but it's also important that you do let them work it out, and let them develop that sort of ability to move the food around in their mouth.
So how do you tell the difference then between that normal and when it turns into choking?
Yeah, so with choking, what you're more likely to see is that those noises, that loud noise, that will lessen, they'll become a lot quieter. So if something's actually blocking the airway, they're more likely to go quite quiet, and they'll go very pale in the face. So when they're gagging, there's a lot of redness and a lot of noise, but if they're choking, they can go quite pale. They might even go slightly blue if they've got something blocking their airway and preventing them getting that oxygen, and they'll go very quiet. And they will often, my little boy actually had this experience when he was about 10 months old. He was eating some plum, sitting in his high chair. I was sat opposite him. He was pretty good on the gagging scale by that point. He was eating quite well, but he suddenly went really, really quiet, and he went very pale. And I just knew in that split second that things were different. And again, just communication. Your little one can communicate with you. And he literally just looked me straight in the eye, and it was kind of a help mummy sort of look. So he'd gone quiet, he'd gone pale. There wasn't that thrusting of his tongue or loud noises or anything. And I knew it had turned from the gagging side of things, and he was choking.
Yeah. So what would you do in that situation?
So there's it's a really good thing to have a practice of what you do with a little one when they're choking. But the first thing obviously is to get them out of their high chair. If you've got an older child that you think is choking, then do encourage them to cough as much as they can. So if they are able to cough, get them to keep coughing. If they're not able to, what we then need to do is go on to actually manage that choking. So try and shift whatever it is that's stuck in their airway. Shall I do a little demo of that now? Will that be good? So on the classes, we do encourage you to come along to a class and practice on the dummies that we have, because it's totally different watching it to actually doing it. What I'm going to do now is just demo for you what we do on a child. Okay, so I've got one of my, not my own child.
The child is down there, but
happily watching Bing at the moment. Yeah. So this is what we class as a child model, and in our classes we practice on these. Okay, so if you have a child that is choking, want to encourage them to cough, If that doesn't seem to be working, what we can do is get them to stand. We stand next to them, okay, so I'll probably be stood up or kneeling up depending on the height of your child. And the first thing that we do is that we do 5 back blows, okay. So this, whenever you're doing choking things, it's important to be aware it's quite, you have to be fairly heavy-handed, okay. You're not going to hurt them. They might get a bit of a mark on their back or what have you, but obviously if they've got something blocking their airway, we need to shift it, so we need to be fairly forceful. Yeah, absolutely. So with a child, we would start with 5 back blows, okay. So we need to get fairly good strength behind your hand, and it's going to be between the shoulder blades. 5 blows, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay. If they're, you need to get them leaning forward, so if anything comes out, we can see it coming out of their mouth here. And if they then start their own coughing or what have you, just encourage them to do that to shift anything else, okay. Obviously, if that works, that's fantastic. If it doesn't, we need to turn them round, okay, with them in front of you. And again, just leaning forward slightly. And what we have to do now is some abdominal thrusts, okay. So hopefully I can get in the right position. You can see.
Can you see that?
That way, yeah. So what we do is we make a fist, tuck your thumb in, make a fist, put that flat to just above the belly button, below your bony part of your breastbone, and just above the belly button, okay. And then we get our other hand and we clasp that around that fist, and we want to do an in and up action. And you can see with the dummy there, that's forcing them forward, and that's going to be putting pressure to try and shift whatever's in their airway up and out. And we do that 5 times, okay. Just be mindful if they're in front of you not to have your head directly behind, otherwise you're going to get up with their broken nose at the same time. So 5 of those. If that hasn't worked, we then go back to the back blows again. Okay, so it's 5 and 5. The technique with the baby is slightly different just because of their size, and it's a little bit difficult to show you that today.
It's the sort of thing you go through in the classes.
Yeah, we go through that in the classes. But the principle is that you're trying to shift whatever it is out of their airway.
Is there a need to seek further assistance once that's been, if you've managed to shift it?
So the guidance generally is that on a child, so from 1 upwards on a child, that if you've done 3 rounds of that, back blows and the thrusts, and it's not shifted, then that's time to call an ambulance. You might want to do that earlier, that's absolutely fine. That's okay, there's a bit of mess on the floor.
That's okay.
That's okay.
Don't worry.
You eat your yoghurt. And the joys of children. And with babies, if you do the 5 and 5 process that we'd show you, they say if after 1 set of those things haven't shifted, then we call an ambulance. But go with your gut, okay? If they've had any of that abdominal thrusting done on them, they need to be seen medically anyway, just in case there's any bruising or anything inside. They do need to be checked out.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you very much.
No worries.
Really interesting and so reassuring too. I think I've done first aid courses multiple times in the past, but just going over it again and again and again really helps. And like you said, actually trying it yourself on a dummy makes a big difference. So it's great that they're so interactive. You've got another
a little gadget. So this is something else we practice with in the classes. And
you want postman pat? All right.
Bear with me. Claire will talk to you for 1 second while I get postman pat.
While we're sorting postman pat. So carrying on with thinking about how we kind of help to prevent that situation from occurring in the first place, and the monitoring of them, so you're picking it up really quickly, you know if they picked up something inappropriate. Other safety things are, if they're in one of these nice high chairs, make sure that they're strapped into it, because they're at quite a height, and if they throw themselves around or want to climb out or try, then they're at quite a big risk there of some injury. So make sure they're strapped into high chairs well. And if it's the kind of chair that fits onto an adult chair, make sure that that is securely strapped, and always check it, because you never know when somebody's just unclipped the clip just to do an extra clean or something like that. So always check that the seating situation is safe. Should we carry on with this?
Yeah,
and then we'll
Postman
go
Pat is in full flow. We're all okay. So this is a lovely vest that we use, and in our kids classes we get the kids to practice with these, and in our adult classes we pop them on the dummies or on each other, and they're just a really useful way of showing you how to do the abdominal thrust. This isn't strapped on or anything at the moment, but we do the back blows on the pad at the back, and then we use this part just to demonstrate the abdominal thrusts. So I'll just show you that again. So your fist flat to the tummy, above the belly button, below the bottom part of your breastbone. Clasp your hand over, and then you're going to go in and up. And I don't know if you saw that.
I'm such a child. That really entertains
so
me.
This is quite a good thing. It's really fun, and yeah, at the classes it's just really helpful for people to see how that action works. So just by squeezing this vest, you hear that noise, and then hopefully we can get the thing. I don't know if you can see that on the video, but the object comes out. So it's quite a useful little tool, and like I say,
to show you how much force you need as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And nothing beats having a proper practice. Really.
Yeah, I think I'm going to come along to the class just to play with
that. Yeah, fantastic.
So the other thing that you can do to kind of minimize risks is obviously what you offer to the child. So a lot of people think that purees and spoon feeding will actually avoid any issues with gagging and choking, but that's not entirely true, is it?
No.
So particularly with a young child, again, we're looking for this tongue thrust reflex to have decreased. So quite often when people are spoon feeding, what they're doing to get the spoon into the mouth is actually kind of going almost over the top of that reflex, that protective thing, and that's why the food stays in so much better. But just be aware that that in itself is a risk, because you're choosing what is going in rather than the child checking that it's appropriate. So just spoon feeding is not an automatic safety thing.
And we get asked that quite a lot on the classes. Is baby-led weaning more unsafe than purees and what have you? So that's a really helpful tip there.
Definitely not. There's nothing to choose between them in the most recent studies. They are looking into baby-led weaning, they're investigating actually whether it's slightly safer because for those reasons, but the studies haven't come out yet. So the only studies we've got are saying that there is no difference at the moment in safety level. It's certainly not less safe. So we're going to talk a little bit about solid foods, and this is from the 6 months old, but it also with toddlers and older children as well. And just making sure that foods are an appropriate size, and that we're minimizing. You can't avoid risk, full stop.
No, absolutely. It's just about being sensible really, and making sensible sort of choices. So should we talk about
let's talk about the plate. We have a lovely plate of goodies of things which are quite commonly choking hazards. And also, so if you're thinking about doing the baby-led weaning, or you're introducing finger foods alongside the purees, you want things which are easy for the baby to pick up and hold. So things quite often sort of finger-shaped, long things are quite good. Vegetables that are quite well cooked, obviously not mushy because you want them to be able to pick it up, but quite well cooked so they're not getting big hard chunks. And then just cut in such a way that it's not creating a round thing the same size as the esophagus. So we're looking for that. Grapes is the one that people know about, isn't it?
Absolutely. So grapes are, if they're left whole, particularly the bigger ones, are just the perfect size to block your little one's airway. So it's really important, if you're choosing to use grapes, even for children up to 4 years old really, that they are chopped appropriately. So we can do them if they're chopped like this, so that is just in half around the sort of widest part of it. That is still going to be a choking hazard because it's still that circle and that round shape there. Whereas if you chop your grape like this, long way, so you've got you've gone sort of top to bottom, that is less of a choking hazard. And even better, is if you can chop it into quarters. So I've got the other 2 bits there, so into quarters, that's even better. And the problem with grapes is because they've got such a tough skin that if they do get stuck, they're really, you know, other softer things are easier
to be squished a bit, to
be squished, yeah. But your grapes skins are very, very tough and hard to get through. So
now, when we were talking about this before, I was interested in what you were saying about marshmallows. That was
so marshmallows, particularly the big chunky ones, but they seem all squishy, and that seems like fine, you know, they've not got hard edges or anything. But if these get a little bit wet, you know, when you're chewing them, they get congealed and they stick together, and then they can sort of expand kind of thing in the back of your mouth and your airway. So they're quite you've got to be really careful with marshmallows as well, the big ones, but also the little ones, because a few of those in your mouth at the same time can stick together and can obviously just get to the back of the throat and create blockage.
And we're not saying, you know, your child can never have marshmallows or anything dramatic like that, but it's just about being aware that there's a possibility. So you don't feed them a marshmallow when they're running around the room like a mad thing.
Absolutely.
So that they're sitting down and you're watching them while they're doing it. It's really what we're saying. At this time of year, these little horrors are a nightmare. They're absolutely solid. Mini eggs, absolutely solid, and they're such a dangerous size.
Yes, absolutely. So and the best thing to do is eat them yourself, quite frankly, for safety purposes.
Definitely. That's what I'm doing.
I brought a packet for this session, but I ate what was in it first, so I just have the empty packet. But yeah, mini eggs, do be really careful. We've got a lot on the mini first aid page about mini eggs. There's been instances of children dying because they've choked on a mini egg, and it's because of the shape and because of the solidness of them, basically. Other things to have a think about are things like nuts as well.
I'm carrying for mini eggs.
Yeah. And so yeah, just anything like that, just bearing in mind the hardness and the size and the shape. So chopping things up, and it's really important that you get your little ones used to sitting down when they're eating. It's a huge safety thing.
It's a teaching thing as well, isn't it? So I know with our son that when we're giving him something like that, we deliberately say bite it first, and kind of chew it straight away, so that he's not playing with it around in his mouth and having a risk. Lollipops, that was the other
lollipops
one,
so you know the lollipops, particularly the hard round ones, very, very careful you need to be with those, as even with your older children as well, because they're, you know, all very well, it's nice, they'll sit and suck them for a bit, but when it gets to the point where it wobbles off the stick, if they kind of inhale that or what have you, it can literally block their airway very easily. So try and avoid hard lollipops with your little ones until they're at least 4 or 5, and again, sitting down, having them sensibly.
I've got a question coming in about where do you stand on grapes, and I would say only in a wine vat myself. Only stand on grapes in a wine vat. Now, we did talk about the grapes and cutting them into either long fingers or the kind of in half, long ways, not in half in the short direction. That doesn't actually help at all. So thanks for the question. So as well as food, particularly when you've got more than one child.
Yes. So we have baby number 3 on the way. When we had baby number 2, baby number 1 wasn't really big enough to be into tiny little toys and things yet, so we didn't really have to think about it. But now we have all sorts of Lego and tiny little, you know, dice from games and things like that. I've got this lovely little gadget, which is called a little choke tester. And what you do is you put it on a flat surface like this, and basically it's designed to mimic the airway of a child. Okay, so the size there. And what it's used to do is, if you can put an object in there and there's nothing sticking out, it can be a choking hazard. So for example, we have a little traffic cone from some kind of toy car thing. If we pop that in there, it fits in beautifully, so that could potentially be a choking hazard for your little ones that are crawling around and exploring. Things like a dice. So if you've got older children that have got games, just bear that in mind as well. You can get bigger, chunkier ones, absolutely great. Lego men, Lego are very popular in our house again. And thinking about, so we've got a toy car here, so this toy car actually the end comes out, no, not an obvious thing, it's sticking out of this, so in a sense the whole as a whole, it's not necessarily a choking hazard, but bear in mind the little parts, the wheels, are they a possibility to come off, and could they be a choking hazard? So that's really important to think about.
You had quite a nifty trick about how you could do it at home without one.
Yeah, absolutely. So not everybody has one of these lovely little tubes. We did have it, might have been acquired, but if you get a toilet roll, okay, so it's a little bit bigger than this, but best to err on the side of caution. But if you get a toilet roll out, an empty one preferably, and you could just use that as a test for how big your toys are, things like that. It's just being mindful again of moving things out of the way that might be a risk for your little one choking, really. But you can see things like your Duplo, they're a lot bigger, much less likely to be an issue. Bear in mind pens, so in itself doesn't look like a hazard, but the lid itself coming off and that getting in the mouth can be an issue. Things like bouncy balls as well. Again, colourful, very pretty. Kids like to play with them, but again,
they just want to put them in their mouth.
Want to put them in their mouth. Want to put everything in their mouth. So just being mindful about things like that, really.
Yeah, fantastic. So another thing that I get asked quite often is, what can they eat? And is there anything that you should be avoiding? So there's not a massive list, but it's kind of similar to when you're pregnant in a way, because you want to minimize the chances that they're going to catch any, have any tummy upsets, that kind of thing. So the main ones that the NHS are advising you to avoid at the moment are honey. So no honey up until 12 months old. Minimizing salt and sugar, really minimizing. So don't add any extra salt when you're cooking anything like that, and minimizing sugar. Now, sugar is not just the white stuff that you put in your coffee and cakes. And there's an awful lot of sugar in things like dried fruit. So raisins are massively sugary. And also, if you think about the pouches and things that you can get, quite often they don't look sugary. But they sweeten them with apple or carrot or a sweet vegetable or a sweet fruit, and because that fruit and vegetable has been processed, that changes the composition of the sugars, and that then becomes like a bad sugar.
So it's not about not ever having those, it's just trying to use them in moderation. So using alternatives at home, your own home cooked food, mashing it, making it nice,
make your own puree in a machine or something like that. But just minimizing those, particularly in babies between 6 months and a year, because they're developing their taste buds, and if you give them a sweet tooth at that point, it's hard to knock on. It's really hard later on. And there is some advice about some cheeses, so the unpasteurized cheeses and some of the kind of mold ripened cheeses, those soft cheeses that to avoid when you're pregnant. Again, with under ones, you want to be avoiding those. Uncooked shellfish, cooked shellfish, fine, not a problem, but it needs to be cooked well, so you don't want any uncooked shellfish or partially raw. So no sushi. If it's raw anyway. Things like that. I know very rarely do I know people who offer shark, merlin, swordfish, but they're very high in mercury. So again, we want to keep the levels quite low. And the other one that I get asked about quite often is eggs, because the advice with eggs used to be no partially or rawish eggs under 12 months, but that advice has actually changed, and you're absolutely fine to do your dippy eggs with an under 12 month, as long as that egg has got the line mark on it. So with line mark eggs, if it doesn't have, then it needs to be fully cooked,
and that just means we're assured of the safety of the egg and
salmonella and all of these things. So that's fantastic. I think we're kind of getting to where we wanted to get to. So it's been really nice having somebody else to go through things.
That's been helpful information for you. So it's not by any means a finite list, is it? But it's just some tips and useful bits of information.
Bits and pieces. If you want to find out more about any of these things, we both obviously run workshops. So I run some introducing complementary solids workshops, suitable, from when your baby's about sort of 4.5 months old onwards. And we can look at puree and traditional type of weaning, or baby-led approach, or both. More than happy to talk about everything. And it's all looking at the evidence base and the science behind it and the reasoning, so that you feel confident in the decisions that you're making. I can deliver those. What people tend to do is do it as a little party. It's really nice.
So
mum and dad friends, get your mum friends and dads as well together. 4 or 5 of you around to somebody's house, and I'll come along for a couple of hours and we can just explore everything and doing quite an interactive way.
You've got Hey Dougie on.
Excellent.
Yeah, so the classes that I mainly run at the moment are 2-hour classes for parents, carers, grandparents, great for anybody looking after little ones, and we cover all the safety things like choking, but also CPR, burns, meningitis, bumps to the head, all of those kind of key things that you can be concerned about. Lovely relaxed classes. I do them as open classes that you can book onto, so you can look on my Facebook page and we'll put a link to that.
And what sort of areas do you cover?
And I cover the East Cheshire area, but Mini First Aid is across the whole country. You can put in your postcode and find your nearest trainers, but I cover East Cheshire, so everything from Crewe up to Northwich, across to Buxton and down to Leek. So lots of open classes available. I can also do classes in your own home for the same price. We just ask you again to have a little group of people together, 5 or 6 of you. And we also do classes for children, which I'll be launching soon. So we do little teaching classes for first aid for 3 to 6 and 7 to 11-year-olds. And we have this lovely book, which is really good, all about encouraging your child to eat sensibly and reducing the risk of choking. So it's called Sip, Chop, Chew. That's available either in classes or on the Mini First Aid website as well. Really good storytelling, just to help encourage your child to know what happens if they don't sit.
It'd be good if you're a teacher, wouldn't they?
Yeah, fantastic for schools, nurseries, yeah, all of that kind of thing.
Yeah, so in terms of areas for me, I cover the whole of Cheshire and the whole of Staffordshire, so basically anywhere within that range. If you're too far away, then I might charge a little bit of a mileage fee just to cover my expenses, but generally anywhere. But I can also offer it as an online, as a webinar course, so we can do it that way as well. So actually anywhere in the country, anyone can use it. It's
fantastic.
Great. And the other thing is books. There's lots of information, lots of books out there. For the kind of more traditional approach, then First Steps Nutrition, it's a fantastic resource, very evidence-based. They've got some lovely booklets which have got some good recipes and good basis, and talks you through when to introduce the different textures and all of that kind of thing. In terms of baby-led weaning, then the Jill Rapley baby-led weaning, she's the kind of go-to for your baby-led stuff, really. Yeah. So that's a really good one. Also, Why Starting Solids Matters. That's an Amy Brown book. She's really good as well. But in the Nutrition and Nurture library, we do have copies of quite a few different things. So My Child Won't Eat, quite a few of the leaflets, How Weaning Happens, and that are available for hire. So lots of things. And the good news is that if you want to book both of us,
yes. So if you come along to one of our classes, either a first aid class or a nutrition and nurture class, and then you want to book onto either one of us, if that makes sense, we will offer you a 10% discount, okay? So if you go to a nutrition and nurture class, you can come along to my class for a 10% discount and vice versa, okay?
Yeah, so that's great.
So, yeah.
I think he's been an absolute star.
Yeah, he has the powers of CBBS.
Excellent. So lovely, and I shall see you next week.
Okay,
Stop.